Greetings! I would like to invite you to the biological laboratory in the Department of Cytology. Today, we will talk about cells, namely the plasma membrane. The plasma membrane, or plasmalemma, is a thin, 6 to 10 nanometers, pellicle that separates the contents of a cell from the external environment. Tap on the cell. Membrane composition: lipids, about 40%, mainly phospholipids and cholesterol. Carbohydrates, 2 to 4%, as a part of lipids and glycoproteins. And proteins, about 60%. The structure of the cell membrane is quite complex. The basis of the membrane is a double layer of phospholipids, which faces inwards with its hydrophobic tails. Protein molecules float in it, resembling a mosaic. Cholesterol molecules stabilize the membrane. Tap on the model on the screen to consider it. Structural elements are specified. This model of the plasma membrane is called fluid mosaic and was first introduced by scientists Singer and Nicholson in 1972. Peripheral proteins that perform receptor and catalytic functions are located on the surface of the membrane. Integral proteins are either embedded in the membrane or penetrated, performing a transport function. You can see green and purple molecules from the top of the membrane. These are glycolipids and glycoproteins. They act as markers to help recognize a cell. Tap on them. Functions of the cell membrane: cell protection, cell integrity, recognition of substances, transportation of substances. Semi-permeable membrane can selectively let certain molecules and ions pass through itself. Dynamic membrane can stretch and contract. Self-assembled membrane has the ability to renew itself. Now let's consider the transport of substances through the membrane. There are two types of it. 1. Passive transport occurs along a concentration gradient without the use of energy. And 2. Active transport occurs against the concentration gradient with the use of energy. Let's take a closer look at a passive transport on the example of simple diffusion. Simple diffusion is the movement of molecules or ions along the concentration gradient from an area with a high concentration of substances to the area with a lower concentration without consuming energy through a semi-permeable membrane. You can see how it happens on the screen. Tap on the membrane model. Simple diffusion is carried out through a lipid bilayer or non-gated protein channels. Consider them. Another type of transport is osmosis. Osmosis is the diffusion of a solvent, water, from an area with a higher concentration, a dilute solution, to an area with a lower concentration, a concentrated solution, through special aquaporins. Tap on the aquaporin and consider the process of osmosis. Plants feed thanks to osmosis. Let's consider active transport through the cell membrane. Tap on the cellular pump to consider a special protein. The sodium-potassium pump is a protein that is responsible for transporting Na+ and K+ ions across the plasma membrane. There is a different concentration of ions on both sides of the membrane. Potassium ions are present on the inside of the cell, and sodium ions are placed on the outside of the cell. With the help of such a mechanism, cells establish balance. The reverse influx of sodium ions to the cell occurs along the concentration gradient with facilitated diffusion. Substances, such as glucose or amino acids, are transported with sodium ions simultaneously. The next transport type is cytosis. Cytosis is the transport of molecules in membrane packaging, i.e. vesicles. The process of endocytosis, on the other hand, is a transport of macromolecules to the cell in a vesicle. The cell forms an extension around an object that is to be absorbed. The membrane grows around, forming a vesicle, i.e. endosome. Tap on the vesicle. Exocytosis is the transport of macromolecules from the cell into a vesicle. The object is surrounded by a membrane inside the cell. The vesicle moves to the cell membrane. The vesicle membrane fuses with the cell membrane, releasing its contents outside the cell. This process is the opposite of endocytosis. Let's summarize. The cell membrane is a lipid bilayer with embedded proteins. The main functions of the membrane are receptor, protective, and transport functions. There are two types of transport that occur through the membrane: passive and active. Types of passive transport are diffusion, facilitated diffusion, and osmosis. Types of active transport are sodium-potassium pumps and cytosis, endocytosis and exocytosis.